Hi there. So I wanted to share some new things that have transpired since the last episode. And in particular, I went to visit a friend who, her daughter is actually, she like hears voices and she sees people and she has various addictions and she has like identity confusion, whether she's a man or a woman. And there's been a number of things that they've been struggling with over the years. And so I went to visit her. And at the same time, I was taking this class, with Thomas Hubel, the Timeless Wisdom Training, which is an incredible program. And so there were a number of like ahas and insights that I gleaned in that particular event that I wanted to share. So just to bring it like home and why it was so timely, this visit and this interaction was that, I'm feeling more called to working with people that have more severe mental health and even physical health, but mental health issues because of my recent discovery. And you can see the video around my realization around hearing voices and how all of us are hearing voices. They might be a lot smaller because our traumas are far less. And then as we heal those fragments, those voices, those sankharas in our systems, we start to have a larger, higher self, integrated whole. And then we start to hear we start to meet higher selves and reach higher dimensions and have more positive voices. And that's what's happening for me in this really amazing journey. And then you start to uncover all kinds of capabilities that humans have around healing and connecting with beings that are in other dimensions and getting scientific discoveries and great insights and ahas and so on all come from these higher dimensions, these higher selves, these deeper theta states, essentially, which you can check out those videos. But essentially, then I was really drawn to working with this organization in the UK that approached me, Compassionate Mental Health in the UK, and they're looking at um, people that have an episode or a severe mental health issue, and the goal is to prevent them from becoming long-term psychiatric patients, ending up in mental health hospitals or institutes and so on. And given the things I'm realizing and discovering, even in my last ayahuasca journey with Santa Daime, I was taken to my deepest trauma, ancestral trauma, in my second chakra, and because there's a history of sexual trauma in my ancestry that I learned from an ancestral healing program, and I was taken there, and I experienced like deep pain and suffering in that moment, and I felt like there were entities or these low vibrations, these sankharas. Like I described them as dragons and demons that were like taking over and pulling me into what I thought would be a deep depression or even a psychosis. But because my higher self was there and very prominent in my system, she was actually taking me there to help me heal that trauma. So she was able to bring me back, my awareness back to my heart, ground out the energy, dissolve it, and keep healing. So I was going through really deep healing programs. So what I feel like I'm being led to and guided down the path of is how to help and work with the people that have severe mental health and physical health, but at the edges. Whatever works for them would take people like you and me to peak performance, flow states. And so this is something that would be helpful to everybody, anybody. And what I realize is it's all a spectrum. Where are you? How much trauma have you had? What is your childhood like? What is your ancestry and your past experiences like that lead to having various traumas in your system that take you into these end up with these fragments and into these lower dimensions where you can get stuck. You can end up in dark night of the soul or psychosis and as you heal, and these techniques that I'm being led to allowed me to discover those options and ways for people to heal. And then it's all about tuning in ultimately to your higher self, to your intuition, and kind of fostering that, following your heart, same concept, listening to your body, the right brain, connected to the body, emotion and sensation, the subconscious, which is vastly intelligent relative to the conscious mind, left brain. And so it's really about tapping into that. And as the more you clear, the more you can tune into that intuition and that higher self. And the higher self has connected to subconscious and consciousness, vastly intelligent, as I mentioned. So it can start to take you and what you need at your point in your journey. So it's not about copying what I do or anyone else does, because it's about what resonates for you at your point in your journey that will have the most impact, evolutionary growth, healing, like capability gifts, that your gifts will emerge. So just wanted to say that. So anyway, this was the context. When I visited my friend, I was really intrigued because her daughter is suffering with so much like mental illness, and the whole family has suffered as a result. So when I got to her place, I was telling her all about what I'd been led to and this organization I worked with that is really looking at alternative healing methods, to see what would help people heal. And they resonate with a lot of things that I've also discovered on my path. So I was really intrigued to see, and their goal is to scale this using, automation AI-based platforms, which is also what's been downloading to me, given my background, my history, and my experiences. So it was just very synchronous, just as my higher self is essentially guiding me down these paths and making these connections. So it's like this unfolding mystery and a great adventure, as I mentioned. And I don't know what's going to happen next. And anytime I try to predict it, it's way off. It's even more incredible than what I expected, and there are deep learnings there. So when I was sharing this with her, and she's actually very interested in various alternative healing methods. And so I was, sharing this with her, and she was really excited. A lot of people have kind of discounted and dismissed her approach of trying to like remother, kind of like create a safe space, and then try some of these alternative healing methods, that meet, her daughter where she is. So anyway, when I was at her place, her daughter would call her, every 15, 20, 30 minutes to come up. And it would be for anything from food or drinks or just wanting something or wanting to connect or whatever. And she would just very compassionately go to her every single time. No questions asked, no resistance. And so I asked her, can I come with you? So I went with her. And her daughter was instantly interested in seeing me, which I was surprised by because I haven't visited in years. And she like lit up, and she's smiling, and she was, this is a pleasant surprise. And so I just sat there. I felt totally welcome. And then the next time we went up, I was telling her about the research that I've shared, Sarah Garfinkel's research and Michael Levin's research. I'll share the links in the description. But the research that shows, how the subconscious is this vastly intelligent system that can lead to better decisions, reduced anxiety, higher P&L, business metrics, and so on. So I was sharing that research with her, and when we got to her room, her daughter's room, we had paused our conversation. So she asked her daughter, she said, do you mind if we continue our conversation here? She didn't say anything, so we assumed it was okay. And I started sharing the research, and in the middle of it, she jumped in, her daughter jumped in and shared, like, before I was going to say something, she shared, I was sharing about this heartbeat count and how, it's really hard for people to tune into their heartbeat. But this researcher, this professor, neuroscience, Sarah Garfinkel, was actually having them do light exercises, jumping jacks and push-ups. And before I could say anything else, her daughter said yes, so that their heartbeat could be much stronger and they could sense it. And I just remember being so struck. Most people were having trouble, have trouble keeping up with the speed at which I'm speaking and the amount of content, the density of the content. Not only was she picking it up, she was actually contributing. Before I said the next thing, she was actually, sharing it. So I immediately was struck by that. And then I was sharing another bit of research from Michael Levin, and the idea that, trauma are basically like tumor cells. They're like a group of cells that separate from the whole and have a separate goal, separate vibration. This becomes like the shadow, the sankhara, the unprocessed memory, the neural pathway, the habit pattern that comes from aversion and craving, like Buddha described. And as you reinforce it, you hear something from the outside that triggers it, one of the five senses, that has the same vibration or frequency as that trauma or sankhara. And then it has a resonant frequency, it vibrates. Now, if you reinforce it, because it is associated with thoughts, emotions, sensations, actions, a mental thought, a vocal action, physical action. If you reinforce it because you can't help it, your conscious mind shuts down, like in trauma. Your subconscious takes over. That part of you takes over, and you actually then might not be able to control your reactions. If that gets big enough, it's like a being within you that has a voice and that can control your subconscious. Now it's running the show. You're in a lower dimension, as I mentioned in the other video I'll share the description around how quantum superposition describes this. So as soon as you're triggered, you're now living in a lower dimension. All the beliefs, thoughts, emotions, sensations, that is your reality. You're living in that world of that part of you that's frozen in time from the past when you triggered as trauma. So you could be 6 or 10 or 15, could even be a past life. But basically you're taken to that dimension. And that is your reality at that moment, wherever your awareness is, just like they talk about in quantum superposition. So anyway, essentially, I was sharing this research about Michael Levin and how he described the idea of a tumor and how, humans or any creature are basically collections of single cells, and how there's this new field called basal cognition, intelligence, and has the hallmarks of intelligence at cellular level, memory, problem solving, learning, and how we are just multicellular organisms with a greater collective intelligence. And collective intelligence he described as the ability to reach your goal despite the perturbations or trauma. So as you heal, you basically have more cells that connect. You have greater collective intelligence. So you can solve bigger problems. Anyway, so I was sharing this and how I'd read An Extended Mind, this really amazing book by Annie Murphy Paul, that talks about three different types of cognition and the things that increase them, and how the mind is not just the brain, but it's actually much larger than that. And it includes embodied cognition, situated cognition, and distributed cognition. Anyway, I won't get into all the details here. I'll do another video for that. But essentially, situated cognition, one of the things they mention is the people that move down tree-lined streets have higher cognition, do better on tests, than those that walk down traffic-lined streets. And my hypothesis, based on Levin's research, was that as you heal more and more and you reduce the fragments and become a larger whole, almost like a single entity, then you're seeking at the cellular level. What he discovered in his research was that the natural, desire is for every cell wants to connect to other cells and solve bigger and bigger problems. That's the natural state of every cell. And that's what I was discovering. Part of the reason I left Google was that as I healed, I wanted to connect to more and more things, cells, people. And in that environment, in that, in a corporate world where there's a lot of competition and there's a lot of people very left brain, very disconnected from the body, it's all about competition, separation. So there isn't as much desire or even capability, willingness to connect to other. And so it was one of the reasons that I was feeling the strong desire to leave, go out into the wild, where I could connect with more people, places, things, etc. So one of my theories is that as you do that, when you're walking down a tree-lined street, you're connecting to the bees, the trees, the insects, etc. So you have greater collective intelligence, and that's why maybe you're doing better on these tests. Anyway, I was sharing this research, and her daughter then jumped in, and when I was talking about the extended mind, she said the extended mind goes beyond the brain, or she said something like that. And I just remember thinking, like, before I even said it, just remember being so struck, like there is a deep intelligence that's shining through all of this, like, mental illness and all these layers that was being shown to me. So then I felt like, wow, she's really paying attention. She's absorbing everything I'm saying. So let me go a little further. So I started sharing how one of the big shifts that happened for me, that this research, then confirmed, validated, was that as I was healing, and I went through this deep healing program where the spiritual mentor was going through each of the chakras, asking me to show the past life that caused the most trauma or blocking in that chakra. And then when we went to it, she would see in vivid detail and share with me what she saw. And there was really dark experiences and trauma, which I'll share at another point, that was causing blocks. And we would go through it, and she would do some healing and release it. And just by sharing the story, was starting to release the blocks. But then she would give me kind of homework, where I would go and speak to that part of me, that being, and have a conversation and share about how much I had since grown and lived, and I'm alive, I'm well, and I'm able to go to the light because they went into so much darkness. So as I was sharing all of this, I basically went on to say that I had major transformation in the workplace, because as I cleared the data that our bodies are always picking up, millions of bits of data from the environment, the people, places, and things, even like processing it with the super computing power that our subconscious has. And because I was clearing the filters and lenses of my trauma, I was getting cleaner, larger sources of data. And because I was connected to my body and tuning into emotion and sensation, the language of the subconscious, I was getting and using a lot more data. So what I spit out then to people, these engineering VPs and directors that I worked with, was much more resonant, because it wasn't getting distorted through my filters and lenses of my trauma. I wasn't projecting my fear any longer. I was actually taking their data, synthesizing it, and sharing back insights that was hugely valuable to them. So I crashed and burned for 6 years. And then in 1 year, because of all of this deep healing work, my team grew 10x and I got promoted to director. There was nothing linear about that. Then I went on to have even more transformative work that is in the first video around why I left Google. But essentially, I shared how I was so blown away by this healing process and this journey that I asked this mentor, I said, what would happen if we went to another round? And we ended up doing it. And this time, I ended up, like, because I cleared my instrument, this highly sophisticated instrument of the body, the human body, so much that I was able to tap into more and subtle energies. So I was able to connect, like, do intuitive readings and be able to see people's past, present, future when I would, do that, focus and do that. And I was able to connect with people that have passed away, mediumship. And as soon as I said that, and I was sharing examples of how blown away and in like shock and awe I was that I could actually connect with people that had passed away. Friends or family had mentioned like first name of a relative, and I was able to facilitate these conversations, blowing my mind, completely outside the realm of anything I'd ever experienced or thought was possible for myself anyway, or for, the average human. And essentially then, her daughter then said to me, there are 9 beings here right now. Can you make them go away? Can you make them unborn? And I said, I could try. She's like, can you do it right now? So I sat, I kind of sat Indian style, and I closed my eyes and I kind of went into my deep theta state, like focused my energy, grounded my energy. And immediately at first I felt nothing. And then I felt in my belly, I felt kind of a sharp pain. My second chakra felt activated, and I felt a sharp pain in my abdomen. And so the message I was feeling or sensing was, this is second chakra. And suddenly it made sense, because second chakra is desires, identities, especially sexual identity. And she was struggling with all of that. She was having confusion about her sexual identity, whether she was a man or she still wanted to be with women, etc., or with men. And but seeing herself as a man. She had a shopping addiction, and she, was like exhibiting things like trying to like want a deep relationship, was really craving a relationship with someone, and like with famous people that she'd, heard about or seen or whatever. So they were all, and these desires, she was like calling her, mom regularly, wanting like things and asking for things. And so it was all related, I realized, to second chakra. So anyway, I then tried to tune in to like these beings she was talking about. I said, can you see them? And she said, yes. I said, can you feel them? She's like, I don't want to feel them. So I tuned in. I couldn't see them, but I could feel their presence. And then immediately I started getting like messages from them. And what they said was, we are unvalidated desires. And until those desires are met, we're not leaving. And it was like a firmness and a strength, and then I immediately got the sense they're not going anywhere. And I don't have enough healing power yet to be able to transmute them, the dark. And the feeling I was getting was, these weren't any, like when we think of them as dark entities or beings, the feeling I was getting, or the message I was getting was, her trauma had become so severe. The sankara had grown so much that basically they had become entities that she could see and feel and hear, not just the voice in her head any longer. These are beings that she's seeing. And there are 9 of them. And there was something about the number 9 that I later realized was like interesting. There are 9 Enneagram types, which is something that I found to be a very powerful tool. It represents all the different types of personalities in humanity. Pretty amazing, one of the most powerful tools I've run into in terms of personality tests. I'll have to create another video for that. But essentially, these 9 entities, and the thing that was coming to me then, well, let me share what happened, and I'll share the insights that came to me. So essentially then, it was really clear to me, I'm not gonna be able to clear them. There's too many, and they're too strong, and I'm not powerful enough yet to be able to transmute that energy. So I was pausing, thinking like, what do I do here? So then the immediate thought came to me was, let me try doing a clearing, a Sushumna clearing, and I'm gonna share with you what it looked like. So I basically said, let's do a clearing. So I said, okay, imagine yourself standing, and there's a cylindrical tube from the heavens to the earth of liquid crystalline all around you, okay? So just imagine you're standing there. Then what you're gonna do is, you're gonna imagine your Sushumna, so a central channel, again, from the heavens to the earth, going through the crown of your head, through all the chakras, through your spine, which run along the spine, through the root chakra, which is at your sacrum, all the way into the molten core of the earth. And now you're going to imagine pressing a vacuum button, and that there's a light, gentle vacuum through that central channel through your spine, that's your Sushumna, all the way into the center of the earth. What we're going to do is we're going to imagine a gentle twister, now moving through each of the chakras and down the body, pulling anything that's not ours, any excess, any debris, any shadow, anything like that that doesn't belong to us and isn't part of our, pure, true essence. We're just going to invite it to, be captured by this gentle twister, dropped into the center, and taken by the earth. So now we're going to imagine starting at the seventh chakra, the crown of the head, pulling anything out, and it goes pretty wide, out beyond even the outer tube, the crystalline tube, to collect anything in your aura and in your being, in your chakra. Then you go to the sixth chakra, between the eyes, the fifth chakra, at the throat, it's your voice. Captures it, drops it in the center. Fourth chakra, your heart, right at the center of the chest. Capture and drop. Go to the third chakra, your solar plexus. It's capturing, dropping. Second chakra at your navel, just below the navel. Capture and drop. And then your first chakra, your sacrum, the base of your spine. Capture and drop. Now just for a moment, imagine them all pouring into the center, right into the molten core of the earth. Now we press a magnet button, and now only your energy comes back to you. People, places, and things, wherever it might have gotten distributed, comes back to you through the central channel from the earth into all your chakras. And you can imagine everyone's going to their own, like cell phone chargers charging their own cell phones. Your energy comes back to you. You can imagine a color if you imagine it, but you just imagine it going through all the chakras up. You get to the top, now take a nice deep breath and imagine a beautiful white light coming in from the top chakras, or from the tubes, both tubes in the heavens, coming down through all your chakras, just tonifying you. So you're surrounded in white light and you're immersed in white light, and white light's going through all the chakras and just tonifying them, almost like painting them, this beautiful white light. And then we're done. And what was interesting was then as I was doing this for her, when I got to the fifth chakra, she immediately started saying to her sister, "Can we please go shopping?" And she started crying. And what I realized instantly was that that's where that trauma lives. That's where, so it's been activated now that I'm trying to clear it. It's fighting back. So then I went on, and I was so intrigued. I got to the second chakra, and I heard all this churning in her stomach, and I could feel mine highly activated, because this is where a lot of these beings reside. I went on, and then I didn't notice anything else. Then I thought, okay, let's do the thing I learned in the Santa Daime Church, which was ground your energy. So I said, okay, imagine your Sushumna again grounding, especially your root chakra, grounding into the molten core of the earth. And now imagine your heart opening, your heart chakra, the center of your chest. That chakra opens. You focus your awareness right here in the center. Now this is the heart chakra. It's love, the highest frequency. So it can transmute anything, as I mentioned in that video on, transmuting dark energy into light. So I asked her to focus here, and I did the same. So all three of us were doing this. And then I started grounding the energy and seeing if I could transmute any of the darkness. And immediately I felt a real darkness kind of start to overtake me a little bit, like I felt in that last day of the last ayahuasca journey. And the message I was getting was, this is really dark. So I stayed there for using all of my focus and concentration to ground the energy. But I could feel it starting to and I started getting drowsy, and I was going into almost a trance-like state. And I said, you know what, this is too much. I'm not ready to transmute this energy yet. I don't want to get pulled into it completely. So I said, let's take a break. So we went downstairs. And the moment we went downstairs, her daughter started screaming, "We have to call the police right now." And she ran downstairs in kind of a panic. And she started saying to her mom, "We need to call the police. We need to call the police." And she was panicked. And her mom started freaking out. She started getting really stressed and anxious. And they didn't call the police. And this has happened multiple times before. And they just waited for her to calm down. And then she went back to her room, and then she was sobbing in her room. And I'd heard about all three of these kinds of things, like her addiction to shopping and wanting to go shopping, when she wanted to call the police, multiple times. And sometimes she actually called them and they would show up. And then, and obviously wouldn't see anything there. And then they would, want to evaluate her for psychiatric issues. And then sobbing, her mom had shared that this happened. I said, "When have you ever seen all three happen?" She said, "Never. I've never seen all three happen all at once." And what it reminded me of, and what I was then sharing with her, was that, so just, to bring it home, it didn't end there. She called her mom again, maybe 10 minutes later. We went in the room and she was all lit up again. She was re-energized. And this time she was like working on something on her laptop. And it looked like she was mentioning like mathematical equations, and none of it made sense to us. It sounded like gibberish, honestly, but she was all excited. And she said, she was talking about if it goes here, this will happen. If it goes there. And her mom was like, it looks like you're really excited, like you're on the verge of something. And what struck me, until later on, and I'll mention here, is I feel like I'm on the verge of something amazing, like the feeling I have, like what I'm, running into and what's being unfolded. And what occurred to me in that moment and what I shared with her mom is, I think your daughter is she's a highly sensitive person, an HSP. Because even when I walked in the room, I tried this new lotion, this perfumed lotion that day, and no one could pick it up. And she immediately was like, I really love your lotion. What is it? And then the fact that she was able to, share what I was going to say before I said it with the research. And then the fact that she was sensing, I think, what I was feeling. So then what suddenly occurred to me was like, in the book Gift of the Body that Jonathan Goldman wrote, amazing book, that the head of the Santa Diamond Church in Ashland, I read his book, and it was all about the chakra system and the energy system and the whole healing process. Was basically, he said that people that are highly sensitive, they have antennas that are up, like up in the upper parts of their auras, and they are picking up what's happening in the collective. And you look at the amount of madness and chaos that's happening in the world right now. So they're picking that up. Now, if they don't know how to process it, they are more likely to end up in psychosis, severe mental illness, because they're picking up all the trauma of the world, and and it's in their system now. They don't know how to process it, they end up going into these psychoses. And so I was like, I think that might be what's happening to your daughter. And she said, I believe she's highly sensitive. I felt that too. And so then she was like, so how do I help her? And what I realized was, because her mother had also like, she shared with me then that she had a lot of rigidity in her body, which is what I learned from, it's a sign of like the sankharas that had built up from Vipassana. So the trauma in the system. She said, and when I tried to walk her through the clearing of the energy, focusing on the heart, she mentioned her heart felt really tight. And so one of the things that I realized is, oh gosh, there's so much to share. That night, I then got a bunch of ahas. So a woman from the Compassion Mental Health Organization, the founder, had actually shared with me, coincidentally, this link to this something called deep brain reorienting, DBR, and neurofeedback. And I didn't like pay attention to the first day, and then the second day after, working with her daughter, I suddenly saw it. I was drawn to it, and I saw the videos. And DBR is basically, it's a technique that tries to get to the root cause of trauma. So before you have, the cascade of events that occur when you register it as trauma, when you go into a fight or flight, and there's all the different, sympathetic tone and fight or flight reactions, like stops the digestion, you get cortisol, you get adrenaline running, so like you can run or fight, essentially. So all the cascade of events that occur. The first thing that happens is that it's registered like with the eyes, then the head and neck, there's be a tension in the head and neck. So it's almost like you're on alert. Your system goes on alert because it's picked up a trigger that is alerting it to that there might be danger. So you end up with a neck and head tension, and it's in the brain stem, which is the back of the neck. And then from there, as soon as it registers as trauma, then the cascade of events occur. And most of the time we're dealing with all those cascade of events. The emotions, the sensations that registered with the trauma. And in severe trauma, people get overwhelmed. As soon as you start talking about it or, the trauma, they become overwhelmed. They go back into fight or flight, and you can't heal. So, and this is one of the challenges, people that have had more severe trauma and more severe mental illness, that they easily get triggered and overwhelmed. One of the things they're finding is that if they get people using neurofeedback into an alpha state, which is a much calmer state, which I think theta is even deeper than that, which is what I've been discovered, then you can basically, from this place of calm, observe in the neck and face, in the head, what are the tensions that precede the cascade events in trauma? And if you're able to then, I think through movement, release it, you can actually start to heal. So I hadn't seen, so I was like totally intrigued, because what was also happening for me in this Thomas Hewell program was that they had us do this like figure 8 configuration in the yoga exercise in the evening. So we were moving our bodies in kind of a figure 8. And it really started feeling really soothing to me, almost like moving me into a theta state. And so when I stopped, I essentially was still kind of in this altered state of like theta state, really calm, really feeling like my higher self had kicked in. Like it was like this soothing, kind of like I experienced in the third day of that last ayahuasca journey at the Santa Diamond Church, where I felt like I was floating in a sea of vibrations, like the womb. So essentially then, what started happening the next day in the heal, as he was going through these, people will ask questions, and he's actually like helping them heal. He's actually going there and helping them melt their sankharas, ground their energy, co-regulate with him, ground the energy, and deep healings that we were witnessing. And anytime, those traumas come to the surface, because it's such a safe space, because he's such a powerful healer. So because he's so grounded, he co-regulates with, like, there were 500 people in the room. So when you co-regulate that and you feel safety, you're able to latch into this person's nervous system, his, and you're feeling safety, grounded. So now you can go to your trauma will come to the surface. So people's trauma will come to the surface and they'll ask a question, and you can see it on their faces and their voices, the fear that they're feeling or any of their trauma at the surface. And what he does is he helps them tune into their bodies, and he's able to like help them ground, like just like transmuting dark energy into light, which I learned, he's helping them do that. And then it's actually literally healing that sankhara, that trauma. And if anyone else in this field now, all of us, have a resonant frequency to that trauma that's come up, that sankhara that's vibrating, then we start to feel it. So it triggers in us, and we're experiencing the healing as well in this healing field. So I was experiencing that, and what happened, and so I'd start crying, I'd feel strong emotions. Even, her mom that was here with me was feeling some of it. She started crying, and he didn't say much, but we were feeling all of this like healing happening. Incredible program. And so what started happening for me on the second day was, I started, as I would right in the program, I felt myself floating again, moving into this theta state. And I was literally moving, swaying like this. And I kept my eyes kind of closed because I could feel it more. Then when he would do one of these sessions with someone who asked a question, I suddenly started feeling sensations, sharp sensations like in my upper shoulder blades. Then I started feeling it in my neck. And then I'd feel a tension in my neck, and my body would start moving, just like I did when I was like following the thread in Vipassana to release the sankhara. My higher self was guiding me down the path to move in a flow state, to heal trauma. And so I was healing it, and the tension would disappear, and I would feel like I'd healed another round of trauma. And that's what was resonant to what I was reading about in this DVR then in the evening. So suddenly, like, my intuition was drawing me, a magnetic pull to tuning into this more deeply. And then when I was basically picked up the book, and this woman, Bridget, had shared that she wanted to introduce me to the people that were working on it. So the person that discovered DVR was Frank Corrigan, and she shared a couple of videos, and immediately I was drawn in. What it reminded me of was, 5-6 years ago, I'd run into this Mongolian shaman who came to speak at Google, who was in France, was in Paris, and she was a recording artist with the BBC. And she had gone on assignment to Mongolia. She was in the shamanic drumming circle, recording it. And she ended up going into an altered state of consciousness where she was moving, and she had a muzzle. She felt like she was a wolf, and she was had paws, and it freaked her out. And when it stopped, the shaman came to her and said, only 1 in 100,000 people have this reaction. You're meant to be a shaman. You're meant to study with us for, 7 years or something, they said. And she's like, the hell I am. I'm leaving. I'm going back to Paris. And it freaked her out. She went back, but she started getting ill and having these dreams. And the message she was getting is, you're not accepting your gifts. So she was like, oh, I have to go see what this is. So she started going back to Mongolia a few months a year, I think. Over the course of I think it was 10 years, she became a shaman. And then she ended up meeting with researchers, and then she learned how to stay still, developed a soundtrack that allowed her to stay still instead of moving around to get into the trance state. And then her brain was what it looked like after the trance state was Buddhist monks that had meditated for 30 years. And then she started exploring what this could do for people. And what she found was that it could actually cure cancer. So a professor of chemistry at the University of Versailles came to her, terminal cancer, couldn't move from the legs down. And when he was in this trance state, this cognitive trance, she called it, which I think was a deep theta state that came from listening to this soundtrack, these vibrations and sounds, his legs started moving in the trance state, and he ended up and then she taught him how to go into that same cognitive trance state. And what she shared with me, I ended up meeting her, and I ended up trying it and going into a theta state. And then all the areas that I had injury started moving. So my knees, my low back, and my neck, where I fractured 2 vertebrae in my neck, had low back issues since I was 16, and I tore my ACL. And those are all the areas that were naturally, I was moving in a swaying motion, involuntarily. It was moving my head, then my body, and then my knees. And then those were reduced when I came back. The pain in those areas was reduced. So it was that deep theta state that goes into self-healing that I discovered at Vipassana, which you're welcome to look at my last Vipassana experience. Deep theta state takes you into these healing, into these higher dimensions where you start to heal. You meet your higher self, you start doing deep healing, etc. And so essentially what she was sharing is that there's this guy that had terminal, she would show them the video, she'd record them. And they would all move in different ways, that their body was like naturally moving into flow states, like, and moving in like dance-like, wave-like forms to heal. And she would record them, and then she would show them the video when they came out of it. And if they replicated those movements, it would be like a gateway back into that trance state, into that healing state. And what I believe then, so that's what the movement is. And it's like if you're able to get into a flow state or a deep theta state or tap into your higher self, they'll take you through those very movements that allow you to heal. And so that's what I like. I think this is what is possible. This is basically research and practices that capture my felt experience, my visceral experience that I was running into. So I started reading her book, Sabern Fisher. It's called Neurofeedback for Developmental Trauma. And I'm only up to chapter 2, but the resonance and the synchronicities to my journey are staggering. And it's blowing my mind. And I'm like, okay, so she talked about developmental trauma, which is different than PTSD, which I didn't realize until I read this book. PTSD was meant for veterans, people that experience like war and the traumas they face. Developmental trauma are what children face, and it comes from the development stages. So essentially, if there's abandonment or like neglect or disconnection from your mother, emotional disconnection especially, then you end up with attachment issues. So this is attachment theory. And that then prevents you from having a full sense of self, because you're not connected to your mother, you lose the sense of self. And depending how severe it is, will determine how much mental illness you end up with. And these are a lot of these folks that have, severe abandonment or disconnection from mother, end up with like these schizophrenia, bipolar, severe mental health issues, where these are the kids that are the hardest to treat. And they end up in like on all kinds of medications and in mental institutes. And like she talked about how she'd worked in places to help them. She was a clinical therapist, psychotherapist, and it was really dismal results, she said, in all of her practices that they tried. And the reason is that what she shared in the book was that, these therapists that are working with them, eventually they get frustrated or, dejected or depressed because they're not able to see progress. They keep seeing these severe and these children suffering so greatly. So they get triggered. And when you're triggered, then you're no longer grounded. And what Thomas Hubel taught me was that, as someone gets triggered by their trauma, if there's a resonant sankhara in your system, you'll also get triggered. And if you don't have the resources to ground, you now trigger each other. So both of you are amplifying and escalating and growing your traumas in each other's presence. So you see this in relationships, in couples that fight about the same things and then become more and more disconnected. The 4 horses of the apocalypse that Gottman talks about, you start to escalate unless you get support, resources, third parties that can help you ground it out, like a therapist that can sometimes help. But essentially then that's what's happening. So if you don't have the resources to ground and stay grounded, then you're basically reinforcing this child's trauma, and they're getting worse every time that happens. So essentially then they don't see the results unless they're people that have done that much work on self to clear. So anyway, she was talking about this in the book, and what was remarkable to me was I actually realized I had attachment issues because, essentially in my ancestry and in my upbringing, my mother had learned or felt that showing too much affection to a child could spoil them. And essentially then, and part of my own wiring from my own ancestry, I ended up disconnecting. And so I disconnected from emotion. Like when I didn't feel like I wasn't able to connect with my mom deeply, I basically disconnected from emotion. I disconnected from the body. I became intellectual. This is my whole journey that I explained in why I ended up leaving Google, of disconnecting from the feminine. And I was very masculine. I was like action-oriented, results-oriented, extrinsically motivated, much more masculine characteristics in my system. And I had suppressed the feminine. And then so this was my journey of like disconnecting from the feminine energy, and disconnecting from self, our true selves, our higher selves, which was my journey. And then what